Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so I think we will get started. Thank you, folks, for joining me. This disembodied voice that you hear is Aisha Connor Gaydon. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm an instruction library at GCC. Welcome. Thanks for joining me on this 6 o'clock evening on a Tuesday to learn about some information. Hi, Tatiana. Hi, folks in the chat. Hi, Joanna. Hi, Jongha. So yep, just so you know, if you are here for information honor code, you are in the right Zoom session. Welcome. Can everyone see the campus guide information honor code here on the screen? You can just put yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Aiden. Thank you, Juliana. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to keep my cam off just because, internet, data, bandwidth, all that. But what we're going to do today, and let me scroll on down here. So this is information honor code. This is in Zoom. I'm sure folks have done enough of that to last us a lifetime, but here we are again. Again, Zoom rules, feel free to raise your hand or use the chat for Q&A. I'll have some opportunities to answer questions throughout the workshop, which is fun. You can participate, please. That makes this a lot more fun than me just sitting here lecturing. And definitely let me know if you have any questions. I will be looking at chat throughout here, so I'll make sure that I get to your question if you do put that in chat. I already shared the pre-workshop quiz. Don't worry about it if you didn't get around to it. Just had some questions about this, what we're going to learn today. And then there'll be a post one as well. So you'll get to do that one if you didn't do the first one. And again, no pressure. Those are just kind of feedback surveys to help us know how the workshop is going. So this campus guide that I'm using right here on my screen is actually also the guide that I've pasted here in the chat. Campus guides are these really great online guides that we create for our workshops. The great news is they have all the information about what we're going to talk about today. It also has a recording of this workshop by one of my colleagues. So if for whatever reason you're like, I completely zoned out, I don't remember what Aisha said during that hour, I don't know what she was talking about, you can go back and watch that recording, and it's a shorter version. So we cut out all of the feedback and stuff. So it's about 30 minutes. So you can always go back and watch the workshop if you don't really get to hear all of this. But hopefully this will be enough for you. Any questions before we get started? I like to kind of jump into the content. And again, I'll do these kind of room checks. You can do like a check mark, thumbs up emoji, put it in the chat. Just want to make sure people are good. Again, we just started for folks who came in. I have literally said nothing except for welcome. Okay, tight. Okay, a few things before we begin the actual workshop content. Again, this is information honor code at GCC Library, and I'm Aisha. You can contact us via phone. Our extension is 5577. If you have any questions, you can use email. We also have this neat little chat, and you'll see that kind of here, this little button on the right side of the screen that's glowing yellow and red. This is a real live librarian who will talk to you. If you click that button, you can ask us questions anytime during library hours. And that always is kind of hanging out both on our website and on these campus guides, which is very helpful. Additionally, we are, of course, open for fall. Here's our hours. We do have our group study rooms available for folks who are post-midterm and you need a place to study quietly, or you need to meet with a group. You can reserve our group study rooms 2 weeks in advance, which is really nice. And those are very, very helpful if you need to meet and study. Okay, so let's jump into the workshop. So like I said, this is information honor code. I'm Aisha, an instruction librarian at GCC. And what we're going to explore today are two main ideas. We're going to talk about the ethics and legal standards of using information. So not only at GCC College, but when we go to a workplace or even when we're just on the internet. So when we see social media, when we are scrolling for news, when we are looking for a new car, we're going to understand a little bit better why and how we should be using information that's on the web. We're also going to learn a little bit about the value of those things as commodities. And when we say that, we mean items that actually have worth outside of economic, social, cultural, political, and social facets. So like, how is information used? Why is it valuable to us? And how do we show people that value using citation and attribution, which we're going to talk about today. So that's kind of what this workshop is about. Again, the whole point is just to understand better why we need to cite. I know a lot of people have asked you to cite for assignments, or maybe you're just learning about citation, and that's fine. There's a reason that we ask this, and we're going to learn more about what that is today. Okay, so let's go up on our campus guide here. Okay, so let's start with information. And it's always nice to really start with a baseline to make sure everybody is kind of in the same place. I know this seems very common. You're like, of course I know what information is. But again, it's always nice to develop basic terms, and then we add on more information as we learn together. So just to begin, information is knowledge obtained from investigation, study, or instruction. So that means when we read things, when we go look for stuff, when we research, right? We investigate. When we read, we study, or when we actually are workshops like this through instruction or learning. So anything within those bounds is considered information. And who can create that information? Anyone, including you, right? Every day you're talking to people, you're looking up things, you're creating assignments for your classes, and all of that is information being shared amongst yourselves. So what do we mean in terms of the types of sources? So sources are these differing types of information. And for the purposes of college, these are the kinds of sources that you're going to see. So again, information is just the knowledge that we share, study, learn, and create. So when we're actually looking at types of sources and the information we see, not only in the library, but online, we might come across journal articles, and those might also be like scholarly sources that you use for an assignment. So professors, other teachers, people who are experts in a field will write up their findings after an experiment or a case study or interviews, and they'll write this journal article, and you'll see that published in various places online. Maybe you use Google Scholar. You might see it there. Of course, we see this in newspaper and magazine articles as well. Other types of information we might see, of course, images in terms of pictures. Maybe we see YouTube videos and other social media videos, movies, documentaries. And then lastly, this kind of other big category, which is just all the other stuff. So research data. So when people do experiments, data from that. Songs, music, speeches, games, all those things are sources of information. Again, we're learning and gaining knowledge from these things in different ways. Now, whether or not those things are scholarly, it depends. But in terms of information, all of this counts as types of information. And that's what we need to know for the purposes of our workshop. So now we know what information is. Let's talk about intellectual property. So when we talk about intellectual property, we mean any creative work or product of the mind. And this means maybe you're using intellectual property in real life, like you're sharing information, entertainment. Maybe you're watching a movie, but you create recipes, you take pictures, and all of this is intellectual property that's being creative and coming from your mind, right? You're like creating these things and bringing them out into the world. And those efforts are a part of having intellectual property. So you just even creating something means that you usually deserve to get credit based on those efforts. So I have a chat question for everyone here. So what form of information or intellectual properties have you used in the last week? And I'll put this in chat. You can put this in chat. Well, what kind of information or intellectual property have you engaged with? Yep, so Angel was on YouTube. Yep, Kindle books, right? So we have books, articles. You read a book, maybe a novel, exactly. Right, so all these different types of media, websites, all of this stuff is intellectual property. Someone created this. It came from a place. Yeah, ProQuest has a lot of books and articles in there. ProQuest is one of our databases for folks who are not familiar. Yep, so we have all this different information, right? Thank you, Gert. Right, so lots of intellectual property, lots of information. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so how do we use information? So now we know what intellectual property is, we know what information is. Let's talk about how we actually use this information. Okay, so one way that we use information is through something called attribution. And attribution is when you give credit to whoever created the information or the intellectual property. So very often we actually use attribution and we don't even know it. Some examples include when we maybe say in our papers, we use citations, which I'll also explain in a second. But more often when we say, oh, so-and-so said this, or they wrote this, or my grandma always says this. Anytime you're quoting or paraphrasing or summarize or copying something into your work, when you're mentioning where that information came from, you are using attribution. You are giving attribution to the original person, place, idea, website, wherever that intellectual property came from. And like I said, very often we already do this in conversation. When you talk about what your friends have told you, or maybe your mechanic told you something you didn't know, you already do a lot of attribution. What happens now when we're in college is that we formalize this attribution into something called citation. How many folks have been citing already? I mean, we're past midterms. I feel like at some point you either did a research paper, maybe an annotated bibliography. Are folks having to cite for their class? Yep, I got a thumb. Okay, yep, essays, exactly. Okay, so some of us have been using it. So yeah, citation is a type of attribution that lists the source's information, including who the author is or authors are, when the work was created, where the work was published or shared, and then any other information necessary according to the style to point back to that item. So the whole idea of citation, and if you didn't really get this from doing the actual citation, now you'll hear it. The whole point of this is to list enough information so that if somebody sees your citation, they know who and what you are attributing. So they can go back and say, oh, Joseph found a novel, and he's going to go back and say, oh, this is the author of the novel. Here's the title of the novel. It was published in 1998. We know exactly where it came from. And even here's an example of what like a citation, again, and folks who have done this, this is what you're probably used to, right? Here's the author name. Here's the name of the book, be data literate. This is the publisher, Kogan, and then here's the year, 2021. So again, that is a citation. Everything in that citation gives us information to know who we're talking about, who wrote the book, where did it come from, and when was it published. And so that's the kind of information we need to use. So that's what attribution and citation is. Any questions about that? It sounds like a lot of you are already doing it. And I'll pause for effect here. Thumbs up, good, great, got it, makes sense. Okay, cool. Awesome. Excellent. All right. Okay, but the good thing about this is now that we know we attribute all the time, we clearly use citation in our classes, which is great. But there are times when you don't necessarily have to cite something. And these are very specific examples. So I'll say before I tell you about these examples, know that anytime you are doing work, especially for college, especially for an assignment, you are always better off if you cite the thing. Always cite it. It saves you so much hassle. It gives credit to the person who created the intellectual property. It helps you better understand where this information came from and what kind of information it is. It's always better to cite something instead of not. And Aiden has a question. When an author dedicates their book to someone at the beginning, is that a type of attribution? Sort of, Aiden. So when an author dedicates their book to someone, those are usually called the acknowledgements. And very often they're just thanking people that helped them make the book or that gave them insight. But very often they are also thanking people, yes, where they got actual information from. So I know a lot of times, for example, a lot of people who write books for colleges actually thank librarians like me because they usually help them find research. And while they might not cite the librarian, right, because they didn't actually write the research and they didn't do the experiment, they did help them find it. So acknowledgements are more so kind of like thanking. It's almost like the Oscar speech or the like Grammy speech where you're like, I want to thank my mom and God. That's kind of what the acknowledgements are in the book. But yeah, if there's a citation in the book, however, that is pointing directly to something and saying, this is an attribution. I use this information directly from this source, and I'm going to make a point about it in my book. So yeah, slightly different, but sort of the same, similar. Good question. Okay, so types of information we do not have to cite. And again, My disclaimer, always cite. Always, always, always. Yes, you have to cite when you paraphrase. You have to cite when you summarize. You definitely have to cite when you quote. Good question, Tatiana. Always, always cite when you're paraphrasing. Yes, because again, if the information is not from you and it doesn't fall into one of these categories I'm going to talk about, then you are plagiarizing, and that is bad. And we'll talk about plagiarism too. Okay. So what are the ways in which we do not have to cite? And again, these are very specific instances. If this does not fall in these categories, you should be citing. Always. One of the ways in which you don't have to cite things are things that are technically common knowledge. Okay, and what is common knowledge? Common knowledge is something that most people know. And when we say most people, we mean culturally. This varies depending on your discipline or the subject you're in. It depends on, where you live. It might even depend on what kind of community you're in. So what is common in college versus what is common, let's say somewhere else outside of school, right? So that does make it a little more confusing, but for the most part, common knowledge is things that everyone knows. And okay, so let's look at some examples. So some examples of common knowledge is Earth is the third planet in our solar system. Again, this is kind of a fact that everybody pretty much knows. There might be some people who don't know it, but for the most part, if you were to ask, let's say 50 people, it's kind of like Family Feud. If you ask 50 people on the street, what's the third planet in the solar system? Most people are going to know it's Earth. And they know that because it's been proven over time. We have a lot of data and research that says that's a fact. There's no disputing that for the most part. Additionally, another example, a comma is a punctuation mark. Again, it's a fact of English language. A comma is a type of punctuation. Everybody pretty much knows that. Similarly, Barack Obama was the 44th president of the United States. Again, it's pretty much a fact. We had a 42nd president. We had a 45th. Obama was the 44th one. That was a historical marker. Everybody knows that. That's in the books. He served his term. It's over. That's a fact that everyone knows. And so again, going back to this idea of common knowledge, things that most people know. However, it does depend on the subject or the discipline. So what is common knowledge in English may not be common knowledge in, let's say, math. So in math, a lot of times you don't have to cite theorems. If you ever took a math class and they were like, oh, Pythagoras' theorem or some other theorem, you don't ever have to cite those. They've been used enough and they've been around for long enough that it's an accepted part of math. You don't have to explain where you got the theorem from. Everybody in math already knows that theorem. So again, common knowledge is the stuff we're aware of, generally speaking. You can think of it kind of like if something is like a well-known fact, it's probably common knowledge. Okay. So the second type of information that we don't have to cite, again, we're not citing these things. These are things that we can use and we do not have to cite them, is things that are in what we call the public domain. And essentially what it is every intellectual property has this thing called copyright. And copyright allows folks to make money off their work. I'm sure people have heard examples of copyright, especially with like music and movies, right? When you talk about like trademarks and copyright restrictions where people can't copy films or copy movies, or you can't use Disney symbols without them suing you or taking your YouTube video down. There's a lot of examples of that. And a copyright really comes from this idea that the person who created the intellectual property, so the person who made the thing, should be able to make money off of it for the entirety of their life. So usually copyright protection for most things is the author's life plus 70 years. So again, the whole idea being that we want this person to make something for us, like creatively. And in order for them to make a living off of that item, we need to have copyright so that they don't get their idea stolen and someone else can make their money, at least for the entirety of their life. So while they're alive. And copyright varies. Like, I think a really great example of that is Mickey Mouse, right? Like Disney renews that copyright very often, even though Walt Disney himself has been dead for a long time. So this does vary depending on the thing. But the idea is that there are things that fall out of copyright. So like I said, most copyright is the life of the author plus 70 years. And once that period is over, you have officially entered what we call the public domain. And the public domain means that that item is no longer protected by intellectual property laws. That means that you can use it freely. Nobody will come and find you. Nobody will sue you. And you can use it, and you can also make derivatives of it, or you can make alternative things to it. So for example, and here's a list, here's some things that are actually who entered the public domain on January 1st of this year. So usually a whole bunch of stuff will follow out of copyright the first of every year. It's really fun to go see what's all in the public domain this year. So actually, as of January 1st, 2022, Winnie the Pooh, so I don't know if you're familiar with the child animal, he's like that golden bear with a little red shirt on. Winnie the Pooh is actually in the public domain. So if I wanted to go right now and make a movie about Winnie the Pooh being like, I don't know, it's since Halloween just passed, Winnie the Pooh is now a demon slayer, and he's going to come and kill some demons and some vampires. I could do that, and A.A. Milne family, the person who made Winnie the Pooh, they could not sue me, because now Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain. I can make another movie about Winnie the Pooh. I can use his name. I can even use his likeness, right? So I could use a Winnie the Pooh type character and call it Winnow, and then make a story about that, and they would not sue me because this is all in the public domain. This story, Winnie the Pooh, is available for me now to use without having to cite them. And it's also now outside of copyright. More often than not, especially if you're in business or you're in entertainment, you always want to give credit and check copyright before you do anything creatively, because the one thing you don't want to happen is for someone to sue you because you use their copyrighted material. And I'm sure you've heard lots and lots of examples of that happening to various people, them not checking to make sure something was legal, and them getting a letter from someone's lawyer saying that they have stolen their intellectual property and they are getting sued for a lot of money. This happens with music a lot too. So yeah, Tatiana asked, how do we know if the copyright is expired or not? Great question. So they do have a list. The US Copyright Office, which is actually linked here as well, they keep a list of things that are falling out of that copyright and like what is and is not in copyright. What I would suggest, because who has time to do that? Just cite it. Just cite it. If you really want to do something creatively and you want to check that something's out of copyright because you want to adapt the story, you should absolutely check with the Copyright Office. But if it's just for a paper or an essay or something for a school, just cite it. And that way you cover yourself. You don't even have to worry about copyright. Good question. Yeah, this gets stickier when you're like outside of school assignments. Okay. So far, we know that we don't have to cite things that are common knowledge. We don't have to necessarily cite things that are in the public domain and have fallen out of copyright. The last area that we don't have to cite is what we call the Creative Commons. And the Creative Commons is, it's a place where you can share, use, and remix sources as long as you give some source attribution depending on the license. So the Creative Commons is this place where people can put licenses on their different intellectual property. And I have some examples here. So items will have a Creative Commons license, and you can read each license next to that item and see what you can actually do. So CC0, as you see here at the bottom, CC0 is a public domain tool. That means that creators have given up their copyright and you can use their work without citing them. So when you see CC0 or you see this little picture, that's public domain. That means you can use it. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to cite. You don't have to attribute. Now, when we go up, this is actually CC BY. So this is a different license. And so when an image or a story or whatever has this license, it means that you can use it, you can distribute it, you can remix, you can adapt it, you can build upon the material. So again, Winnie the Pooh, the Demon Slayer can be used. However, you have to give credit. So this means that the creator wants you to put their name somewhere on your product, either in as a citation, or you have to say, you know, Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne, or original story by A.A. Milne. So a lot of times the licenses will be, Molly asked, where do we see the licenses? So a lot of stuff will have the license directly underneath it, or on top of it, or on somewhere near the actual image. Sometimes it'll be on it. So you'll see a lot of times with like commercials and stuff, you'll see that little copyright symbol. They'll use copyright because that's just straight up under copyright. You cannot use that at all without getting sued. With the Creative Commons license, it'll usually be on top of there or underneath. You'll see it somewhere. And not everything has a Creative Commons license, but this is an example. A lot of these have examples. And actually, so let's go any questions about that before we jump into an activity? So again, the things that we are not having to cite, we're citing everything but common knowledge, sources that are in the public domain and have fallen out of copyright, or things that have Creative Commons licensing, and then we have to follow what the license says. Does that make sense? Everything else needs to be cited. Everything. YouTube videos, podcasts, documentaries, an interview with your brother. If you're putting it in your paper and you did not come up with the idea, it needs to be cited. Make sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down, questions. Okay, I've got 2 thumbs, 3 thumbs, 4 thumbs. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure thing. What's up?
How do I know what to write? For example, I'm having many times like hard time even when I have an article.
Mm-hmm.
What do we have to put? I see here that you have author, last name, and page.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, how do I know when I put the page? How do I know when I put the paragraph, or what exactly goes there? Or when do I put the book name, for example, or the article name?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So Tatiana asked, how do we know what we need to put in our citation? And for folks who have done citation so far, you know this already, but each citation style, so usually your professor or whoever will tell you a specific style. And I'm actually going to open our style guide here. And so this is an example, actually, Tatiana. So this is MLA, the Modern Language Association style. And the whole point of Citation Styles is they tell you exactly what kind of information you have to include. So every single style will say, if you want to cite a book, this is the information you have to have. If you are going to cite let's see, I know there's an article on here. I'm going to go scroll down. So yeah, here's an example. If you want to cite a journal article from a database in the library, this is the information that you have to include. So authors' names, journal title names, the database you got it from, and the URL of that item. So every single citation style tells you exactly what you have to include in your citation. That's a really good question. And I'll actually link, let me do a quick search here. So I don't know, has anyone taken the Learning Center workshop on citation styles? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, yeah, I'm going to put this in the chat. So the Learning Center at GCC, great place. There's a physical location in the admin building, but they do online and in-person workshops. And actually, they actually have one going on right now at the same time as ours on citation styles. So like I told Tatiana, every single citation style will tell you exactly how to cite an item for your research. You can attend these and they will help you. The next one is on November 10th at 12:30, if you're interested. And here I can link to this too. So yeah, cite, this is the thing, they're going to tell you actually how to cite the thing. I'm not going to do that in this workshop. But yeah, that'll tell you exactly how to cite a book, how to cite an article based on the citation style. Very, very helpful workshop. And you also get credit, just like this one. Good questions. Any others before we move into an activity? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. Cool. 1 thumb, 2 thumb, 3 thumb. Okay. Okay. So We talked about the Creative Commons, and someone asked, how do we know and where do we see it? So let's actually practice, this is really good practice for us. Let me get my link here. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm actually going to have you find something in the Creative Commons. So the Creative Commons has this thing called the open verse. And the open verse, which sounds like something from the metaverse, but it's not. The open verse is a place where lots of people submit their content with Creative Commons licenses. And why this is so helpful is instead of Googling something online and not knowing what the license is or what the copyright is, you can use the open verse and know exactly how to cite the thing, which is very, very helpful. Let me go ahead and open it just so you can see. So here's the open verse. And I'm actually going to look for a teddy bear since we're talking about, so this is all the content. And here's all the teddy bears in the open verse. And just like with Amazon, what I can do is I can filter here on the right side of the screen and check these boxes. And each of these boxes is a different license. So again, if I want stuff that's in the public domain, I'm going to click public domain or CC0, because I know CC0 means this has been dedicated to the public domain, because now I know licenses. That means anything with these two licenses, I can use and I do not have to cite that item. So I could take this picture of the teddy bear in the window. And I know that this is in a public domain. That means I do not have to cite this item. I can get this item easily and download it and use it. From here, I can just download it, and I do not have to cite this item in my paper, or if I was doing a presentation, probably I wouldn't have to cite it. Okay. Once an intellectual property has fallen out of copyright, can it be placed under copyright again? Ooh, good question. I think it can be, actually. I think there's some odd circumstances with stuff like that, but I feel like I have recalled at least a few cases where folks have had stuff falling out of copyright and then they like renew it. So what you can do is renew your copyright as well. And so there was a law enacted, I think in 1992. Yeah, it's basically a formality where you can extend your copyright. So this happens a lot when people, like I said, most of the time people need to make money for their life plus 70 years, and that's so that their family can also make money. And so sometimes what you'll see is that people's families will renew copyright on their behalf so that they can continue to make money off of their legacy. I feel like this has probably happened with someone like Elvis, for example. Good question. Okay. Just sending a quick message to somebody. All right. Any other questions about that? Okay. So what we're going to do, go ahead and open this Google form. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. It shouldn't take too long. And what you're going to do is you're going to open the form. It's going to take you to the open verse. And then go ahead and just search for an image in the menu. And then once you find an image, answer the questions in this form. And again, we're just learning about the creator of the image. We're going to look at the license. So what does the license mean? And then what do we have to do? And that's just to make sure that we understand what the Creative Commons is telling us and why we need to use it. Any questions about that activity? Nope, that's okay. You can use any email for the, don't need to resubmit. If you already did it, great job. I'm going to give folks maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do it if they haven't already. I'll put it again in the chat. No worries there. Oops, I sent it to just a Julio. Sorry, Julio. Let me send it to everybody. So yeah, if you did it once, you are great. What I'll do, let's actually go look. I love Google Forms. You can always kind of go and look at stuff. Okay. Ooh, but we can watch the answer scroll in. Okay, yep. So feel free to put that. I'll give it another 2 minutes for folks who are getting in the form. I'm just looking over some of these other ones. Yep. Public domain licenses. Yep. So what you're going to do is in the open verse, just search any image. And then once you find one, just answer the question. So who made it? And usually the username is underneath the image. What is the license? And you can click on the license to learn more about it or try to read the little image itself. Sometimes it'll say directly on it what it is. And then what does that mean you can do with the image? So yeah, just choose any image. It's okay. Good questions. Any other questions about the activity? Again, probably one more minute just to complete. Very short form. How are we doing? A couple more people. Okay, cool. We've got some different types of licenses. Nice. Yeah. And like I said, the great thing about Openverse, you can sort it just by public domain. So if you don't want to deal with the headache of figuring out whether or not to cite something, you can put everything in CC0 or public domain, and then you don't even have to worry about it. Just filter everything else out. And there's tons of pictures in there. I really like using the Openverse for presentations. Very, very helpful. Okay, if you're still submitting, go ahead and just finish. And we're going to move forward. Thanks so much for participating in the activity. Just wanted to give you a sense of how the Openverse works. Definitely bookmark that for yourself, because again, very helpful when you're looking for, especially content for projects, creative projects where you need pictures of people or places or backgrounds. You can get in from the Openverse and not have to worry about getting sued, which is very nice. Okay, one last word on copyright and public domain stuff. So here's why we don't use Google. So again, we love Google. Google is amazing. It does a lot of great things for us. It is a portal to so much information. But one of the reasons why we don't use Google Images for academic projects is because very often Google does its job well, which is that it takes things off the internet and it gives you what you've asked for. But very often, Google image search only shows you the thumbnail, so you don't get a high resolution image like you do in the Openverse. It usually links you to a website where you have to pay to use the image. Sometimes it'll take you to like those stock photos where it has the kind of watermark over it and you can't even use the picture without paying. Or it has copyright limitations. So again, you don't know that the image is under copyright until you use it. And will someone track you down and find you? Probably not, but it's always better to know about citation than not to do it. And so this is why Openverse is so great. It may not have as many cool images as Google Images does, but it does allow us to make sure that we are ethically using sources of information and intellectual property for our academic projects. That's why we don't use Google, at least for this. Okay. Molly has a question about, share adaptations of the same terms, under the same terms. Yep. So when that's just saying, so Molly asked, one of the licenses says share adaptations under the same terms. And that literally just means that if you use this image and you adapt it, so that means you use it and maybe you do something slightly different, or you're adapting it for your project. So you're placing it in your project or placing it in another context. So say I take an image and I put it in a video that I made. It's saying you have to use the same license that that person used in your project. So if their stuff's in the public domain, they want you to also put your project in the public domain. So again, very good question. Okay, that's okay, Jung Ha. Thanks for submitting. If you took a photo of yourself and wanted to use it in a paper, you wouldn't have to cite it, right? Correct, Juliana. That is your intellectual property. So when you take a picture of yourself with your own camera, that's your intellectual property. You don't have to cite yourself. We're only talking about sources of information and intellectual property that is not created by you. So everything else outside of you is information you need to cite. Yeah, Molly. So for the share adaptations, yeah, not necessarily the format, but definitely the licensing. So even if you make a video and you use that picture, they're expecting you to use the same licensing. And that again is just to have people share more stuff. They know a lot of people will use someone's, say for instance, you did take a photo of yourself and you put it in the Creative Commons. They want you to then allow other people to use your photo and not try to like copyright it after they use it in their project. So that's why they say share alike. They want you to do what they did, which is to leave it open. Kind of like an honesty way. They want you to be a part of the community, which is really kind of cool. Okay. Okay, so let's get on to academic honesty. One more question. So what about a known piece like the Mona Lisa? Yeah. So things like artwork are a tricky period. Technically, artwork, especially like the Mona Lisa, that painting of the woman kind of smiling, very, very well known. Definitely out of copyright because it was like painted in like the 1600s or whatever. But in terms of where you got it from, you want to cite only because most times you are not looking at the physical Mona Lisa in wherever it is. I think it's in the, I think it's in France or Paris. But if you're not looking at the original Mona Lisa in the museum, you need to cite where you got the picture from. So, which is more often than not, it's going to be like in an art book or online. Oh, the Louvre. Thank you, Aiden. I couldn't think of the museum. Yep. So unless you're looking at the painting in the Louvre in Paris, you're looking at it from somewhere else and you need to cite where that place is. So if you're looking on MonaLisa.com, you got to cite MonaLisa.com because you're not looking at the original painting. Good question. Yeah, some of the illustrations are tough. Other examples like quotations, common knowledge quotations, you don't have to cite, but others more specific quotations that people may not know, you do need to cite them. So it just, Shakespearean stuff, usually don't cite it. Other stuff, you do. It just kind of depends. That's why I always like to say just cite it all the time and you're never wrong. Good questions, everyone. Okay, so we are talking about the honor code in here, and when we're referring to the honor code, what we really mean is that the honor code is a part of academic honesty. So we talked a lot about how to cite, how to attribute, what it can look like, where to find stuff that we don't have to cite, but we didn't really talk about like why, right? So the whole point of academic honesty, which is this idea of the responsibility to produce your work and not pass it off as others, right? This responsibility to one another and to your community as scholars, really important. The whole point is to give credit and to acknowledge the work of people who have come before you. That's why we ask you to cite. It's like a community thing. You think it's very touchy-feely for academia, which is really funny. We really want you to just understand the information, and it also lends you a sense of credibility in your subject matter because your instructor can say, oh, you know what, Adriana really understood this novel. Like she read it, she quoted these things, she knows exactly which character said what and why. It really shows your instructors and the people who are reading or taking in your work that you understood the sources that you used and you put them in the context of your work in a correct way. So you made sense of it in your own words, which is all we want when we talk about assignments. We want you to be able to make sense of the information that you found. Okay, so what happens when we don't use academic honesty, right? And one of the things that happens is plagiarism. So plagiarism occurs when you use another source or someone else's words or ideas without giving them credit. So again, very often people will use their work in many classes. Technically, that's plagiarism, unless you're citing yourself. Again, because you're technically saying, for this assignment, I'm using this paper, and then I'm taking it over to this other place, and I'm using it again. You need to say like, oh, this paper in the context of what I was using for is actually for this. I want to pull some stuff from there, and this is where I got it from. Other examples include the former First Lady, Melania Trump. Her speechwriter plagiarized another speech from Michelle Obama. And now again, was it intentional? No, it was actually an accident. But because she did not quote or summarize or paraphrase or give attribution, say, hey, former First Lady Michelle Obama said, it's plagiarism because she did not give the credit where credit was due. And that's very important. Another example of this plagiarism is when we go to online and we use those essay farms, right? Where you say like, oh, I just need a paper on, I don't know, Joan of Arc. And you go online and say Joan of Arc essay, and then you use that as your own, right? Because we know that's not your work. You're not citing the work of any of the people that you read. You're not familiar with any of the information or any of the intellectual property in that essay. And you're basically just plagiarizing other people. And it's some other person's idea. You don't even know who that person is. Hopefully they write well, but usually you don't even know that. Okay, so that's what academic honesty. Any questions about academic honesty or plagiarism? Again, the whole point of the honor code is to acknowledge that we need to give credit and that we have a responsibility to others and ourselves to produce our own work and to not pass off our work, the work of other people as our own. That's the whole point. Thumbs, questions, confusion. Okay, you probably heard this before. A lot of classes have a academic honesty like piece in the syllabus where they're like, don't cheat, don't plagiarize. Okay, so a few things about academic dishonesty, which is when we are not academically honest. Why do we do it? We don't have enough time, we're stressed, we're tired, we don't have good ideas, or maybe we're just doing poorly and we're like, you know what, I'm gonna just do whatever and see what happens, right? But how do we do better? Well, we have strategies to avoid being academically dishonest. One of them is good timing, making sure you give yourself the time to research, to read, to cite, to learn, to evaluate, right? Very, very important in college to make time for good research habits. Next, we need to learn how to recognize what needs to be cited. So again, if it's not common knowledge, it's not your own opinion or intellectual property, or it's not licensed under a specific type of license, then you don't have to use a citation. Everything else we should be citing, because again, it shows us that we respect the hard work of the creators. It tells people that we know what we're talking about and that we've read other ideas besides our own. And we're also adding a voice to the conversation of many other scholars who have come before us. And that's why we cite. Very important to understand you're part of a community now when you're doing work for your classes. And, you know, people see that. Very, very important. And we already know that a lot of times people are not being cited, and that's bad. Not great. What's another strategy to avoid academic dishonesty? Well, we can use citation styles. Very, very helpful. We talked about this briefly, but these citation styles help us make sure that we're not plagiarizing. And usually your assignment will tell you exactly which citation style to use. If you're not sure, always ask your instructor what type to use. And then lastly, how do we avoid academic dishonesty? Well, we get help. We have the research help desk at the library. We're happy to help you cite something, to say, hey, this is a common knowledge. You don't have to cite it. If you say, hey, I need a picture of a bear for my video for class, great. We'll help you find a picture of a bear. Like, come and talk to us in the library during library hours. We're happy to help you at the research help desk. I already linked out to these Learning Center workshops, but they have one on academic honesty and MLA and APA documentation that I already linked to. The next one is on November 10th. So please attend that if you need help citing. We also have a guide on citing sources, and I'll put this in the chat as well. And this just links out to all of the various guides that we make on how to cite. So all the major styles are here. It'll tell you, again, how do you cite each of the things. It'll also tell you how to avoid plagiarism, which is very helpful in addition to what we learned in this workshop. Okay, any questions about strategies for academic honesty? One thing that people may not be aware of is that GCC has an academic honesty policy. You can see here, it's some basic stuff about what behaviors violate academic dishonesty. And believe me, you do not want to be in a room explaining to someone why you plagiarized. It's painful for everybody involved. So it's always best to cite your sources. If you're not sure, always cite. Any questions about academic honesty, plagiarism, or strategies to avoid academic dishonesty? So when we aren't being academically honest. Questions, thumbs up, thumbs down. Smiley face with the Z's on it, smiley face with sunglasses. Okay. Oh, Aiden says, where do I find the strategies? Okay. Here's the campus guide page. And like I said, this is going to stay up beyond this workshop. So the cool thing is you can bookmark this or send it to yourself or keep it in a Google Doc. And it'll be up beyond this day. So all the links in here are live. The open verse lives in here. You can come back here anytime and check this stuff. So someone asked, is there a way we are able to check if our paper may be plagiarized in Google Docs? I don't think Google Docs has a tool for that. I know we do have Grammarly. And let me go to the Learning Center. So one of the tools, oh, Joseph says there are Google extensions. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's check that out too. Okay. This is not where I wanted to go. Take me to our website. Okay. So I know we have a thing called Grammarly through the Learning Center. Let me go to the Learning Center website. Here we go. This is what I meant to look. So we have something called Grammarly Premium. And this does have plagiarism detection. And here, I'm going to link this to everybody here. And again, because you are a GCC student, you get this for free. So don't go to Grammarly.com. Go through here. Oh, you couldn't update your mind. Okay, yeah, I would probably reach out. So Molly says she couldn't update hers. I would probably reach out to the staff member. Yeah, see, they've got a help thing here. They're in the admin building, but they're also in Canvas. I would ask them to help you update it. If it's not working for some reason. I haven't used it in a while. So if something's changed, they should know how to help you. But yeah, we have Grammarly Premium. And again, that includes helping you with rewrites, tone adjustment. So if you're sounding too silly or too serious, or it doesn't make sense, plagiarism, which is the big thing here, using better words, fluency, all that. Very, very helpful writing tool. Good question. I always forget to mention Grammarly during this workshop. So that's very helpful. And again, you do not have to pay for it through the Learning Center. That's key. The whole point of being in college is paying for classes, not for all these other tools. And that includes stuff from the library. Never pay for articles or books either. Let us help you. Well, except for textbooks, because we don't buy those, but everything else we can help with. Any other questions? And that can be about anything: citation, academic honesty, plagiarism, tools to help you avoid plagiarism. So I think someone asked, how does Grammarly know there's plagiarizing? I think it's all through like what they call the text, what's it called? It's like text coding. They can tell when people are using phrases that are commonly used in other places, like in other text or online. And so they'll give you a warning about that they've seen this phrase in other places. I think that's kind of how it works. I know technology is amazing. Yeah, I think they do also recommend things in Grammarly. If they think you're maybe plagiarizing something or you're missing a citation, I think they tell you. Again, I don't know if it's going to be as good as having someone read your paper, which also is another thing they do at the Learning Center. There are tutors, and you can also make an appointment and a tutoring appointment. Very, very helpful. You can actually have someone read over your actual paper, and that might be more helpful than Grammarly. Grammarly is good if you can't meet with someone. If you have time to make an appointment, so you started your paper early enough, make an appointment with a human being. That's always my suggestion, because not only will they check you for plagiarism and tone, they can also give you feedback about your writing. And I don't know how good Grammarly is at that either. So again, Grammarly is great for after hours, but if you can make an appointment with a human being, do that at the Learning Center. They have writing tutors, very helpful. And usually your peers, people in your classes that are just really good at writing. Good questions. Any others or things you want to share in terms of how you avoid academic dishonesty? I think a lot of y'all are already use some of these tools. Okay. We have about 5 minutes. So we'll do a quick wrap up and then we have our post survey that I'll send out. Okay. Okay, yeah, take some time. If you got a question, take some time to give it. We'll do the quick wrap up. Okay, so we're going to go through our definitions to see where we are, make sure we understand what we learned today. Okay, so what is a citation? Do you remember what is a citation? Okay, we got some C's, we got some A's. What is a citation? Okay, yeah. So citation is a type of attribution. Remember, this is a thing where not only are we saying where we got the information from, but we're usually going to use a style like MLA, APA, or Chicago style to give information about the source so that if someone wants to go find it, they can using your citation. Okay, what is intellectual property? All guesses are welcome. We're going to review anyway. Okay, got D. Okay, yeah, I think people got it. A creative work of the product or mind. Remember, when you create things, when you make a recipe, when you take a photo, that is your intellectual property. How exciting. We're already doing this. What is common knowledge? Okay, B, correct. Something that many or most people know. Again, Earth is a third planet in the solar system. A comma is a type of punctuation. All common knowledge. Most people know these things. We don't have to cite them because everybody pretty much knows them as fact. If you're ever not sure if something is common knowledge, just cite it anyway. It will save you a lot of hassle later in life. Okay. What is academic honesty? Okay, yep. D. I know it's probably easiest because some of these are like so simple and then some are super drawn out. Yes, the responsibility to produce your own work and not pass off the work of others. Okay, perfect. Okay, any questions before we kind of wrap? Again, y'all have had such good questions so far. Thank you so much for participating. I'm going to throw a couple resources in the chat. First, our post survey. Please fill this out. There's no penalties for wrong answers. This is honestly just feedback for this workshop. It helps us make the workshop better, helps us make sure that you're learning what you need to learn from it, all that jazz. I'll also put the campus guide. So the thing we're actually using on the screen right now, I'm going to put that in the chat. You can bookmark it. Again, Openverse tool for Creative Commons licensing is in there. Strategies to avoid academic dishonesty is in there. Eventually, we'll have a recording of this workshop on this page. Like all of this information will be there. Oh no, survey's not mandatory. You don't have to fill it out if you don't want to. It's just to help us give feedback. So no worries. Up to you. So we have about 2 minutes. Any questions, comments, concerns, either library or information honor code related? You're welcome, everyone. Thank you for showing up. I know it's hard to come in the evening. Y'all got jobs and classes and kids and parents and dogs. It's always great to see you, even if it's in the Zooms. Yeah, no worries if you did the surveys. Thanks so much. Those are just feedback for us, and they're anonymous, so it's really helpful. We don't know who you are on there. It's okay. Okay, other than that, thank you. I'll hang out here for another minute or so, but thanks so much. You should be getting credit for this shortly. I'm gonna put it in today, so you can see that in my GCC probably in the next hour, honestly. But thanks so much for coming, and contact the library if you have any questions. Have a good night. Be safe.